So there are a lot of funders in emerging markets, especially Africa, who are in fact philanthropists. They are foundations and charities, but they invest. They don't just grant. And so one thing that I've seen that's happening more and more, these organizations that historically have done grants, they're dipping their toe in the water of investments in the form of recoverable grants, which sounds a little oxymoronic, but isn't. So it's a grant. The donor slash investor, the donor gives money to the organization. And again, there's no cash flow that happens. So it looks a bit like equity here, because at some point in the future, there can be a payment back. And so the key terms that I've seen a dozen of these. The key terms would be a trigger event. So literally there'll be a paragraph that describes something that has to happen in the future for this grant to get repaid. Sometimes it's as simple as 3 years from now, you pay us back what we gave you. And the assumption there is, well, if it succeeded, you're still around in 3 years. And if it succeeded, you have the money to pay back the grant. And just the money back, $100,000 as a grant, I would pay back $100,000, $40,000 as a grant, $40,000 back. No extra payment. More commonly, you'll see something like when the company has earned, or the organization has earned, call it $500,000 or $1 million or something, trigger event, then the payments due back. And I've seen it as terms of investment. I've even seen one that was an acquisition. So we'll give you the money, but if you are acquired, you give us back 3 times what we gave you. So it's like a 3x liquidation preference is how we talk about that in the equity investing world. But basically we're saying, I want a piece of the action. I was just flabbergasted when I saw that one, because basically it's an equity investment. I'll give you money, and if you get sold, if you get acquired, I want more back. But instead of a percentage ownership, it was just a fixed multiple. And so you get some really weird things that could happen there. Like, yes, the company got sold, or the company has an acquisition offer, but it's for so low that all the money would go back to the philanthropist. Like that could happen in a deal like that. And then what I've seen more often than not is that there's an interest rate attached to this. And I saw another one that looked kind of like equity that said, here's money. If there's an acquisition, we will get paid back our principal plus 25% compounded interest from when we gave you the grant, which 25%, just to be clear, in terms of internal rate of return, that's a really high return for a venture capital fund. So for a philanthropist to say, I want 25% compounded interest is, again, basically saying it's an equity deal. I just don't want to deal with all those equity terms. I don't want to deal with the taxing authorities as a nonprofit doing equity investments. So I'll just make it look like a grant. I don't know, Joe, you've seen any of these?
Yeah, I have seen. I think they're becoming. I mean, they're really interesting, right? I mean, I think they're driven by. Yeah, they're just driven. I think they're just driven by the impulse that, hey, we do want to make effectively like a gift, and we realize it's most likely a gift. However, if you're enabling somebody to through a grant to achieve something that, I mean, you're basically helped create. I mean, that it feels like part of a fair compensation for that should be returned.
It's totally fair. I'm not complaining at all. These are totally fair. Like in terms of simplicity, oh my God, is these simple? I've gotten these before. I run a nonprofit as well. We've gotten recoverable grants into our organization. What blows my mind is that they don't even ask us to sign them. Like when we get a grant, there's a grant letter and it's signed at the bottom by the grantor. And so they've just taken that practice into the recoverable grants as well, which is, here's a recoverable grant. Here are the terms. Send us back the money if you don't want the terms, but it's not like everything else before this. As an angel, you get to sign the contract. A recoverable grant, they didn't ask for a signature. They sent the money over, and if your acceptance of the money was your acceptance of the contract.
Yeah. So it's very much like a loan in a way.
I've never done a loan where I haven't signed the paperwork either, except maybe.
Yeah, I know, but theoretically, if someone just gives your company money, and there are circumstances in which it might have to be repaid plus additional amounts, then I think the default would be, oh, it must have been a loan.
Yeah.
Although a loan with the conditions described in the grant agreement they forwarded to you at the same time. I guess that's the way.
All right. So we're running out of time, so I'm going to move on. So where would you see something like this? A friend of mine runs a fund So fund manager, it's called the trust fund, got started last year because it was a pandemic mitigation fund. And all the money that went into the trust fund went in the form of recoverable grants. And the recoverable grant read, we'll give you the money, and trust fund promises to pay you back. The trust fund promises to spend 2% of your money running the fund, and they'll give you back whatever else comes of it. And so you're guaranteed to lose 2%. You can't get anything better than negative 2% on this grant. And so in terms of like, you wouldn't really write a loan for negative 2% return, and you can't do an equity deal into something where you're guaranteed to lose money. So it made the most sense to do it as a recoverable grant, which is why we did it that way.